Hi, Bill Vales here, and I'm here to tell you about an exciting new show that we've been working on at LCTV. The name of the show is Your Backyard. And on Your Backyard, we're going to take you through all the conservation trails that are in Littleton. And our guide for this is going to be the Guide to Conservation Land of Littleton, Mass. And this book was put out by the Littleton Conservation Trust, written by Art Lazarus, a longtime Littleton resident and geologist. We're very excited about this show, and we'd like you to sit back, relax, and let's see where your backyard takes you today. Another glorious day, and today we're at Doublet for our second visit to Doublet. This time we're entering the Doublet forest off of the trailhead on Nagog Hill Road. And it's just an absolutely glorious day. It's high pressure, first day of fall. I'm hearing birds behind me. I'm looking forward to seeing some nice birds and seeing a beautiful area. So here we go. Bring my stuff, and away we go. Well, we're heading into the Doublet forest using the Dr. Ed Bell trail. Dr. Bell was one of the founders of Acton Medical, and Dr. Bell was a longtime Littleton Conservation Trust member and made a lot of contributions in and around Littleton. And this area was an area that he really loved. So it was very fitting that a trail was named for Dr. Bell. Last time when we came to the Doublet forest, we entered off a Charter Road on the Knapp Jenkins Trail. This time, as I said, we're going on the Dr. Ed Bell Trail. You'll notice that this trail is blazed in blue. So that'll tell us that we're on this trail. Just some areas of note here, sort of scanning around. There's a lot of oak trees. Standing oak, probably mostly red oak. Actually, this tree here, this is a maple tree that I'm looking at. And I see a lot of red oak as well. They have the pointy leaves. And the leaves are still on the tree. We're only into the first day of fall. And it's an absolutely beautiful day. I'm hearing in the background, I heard it a little stronger when we were first coming in here, kind of the murmuring of a catbird. I just heard it again. So I'm going to be not only looking for birds, but I'm going to be listening for birds, because often you can see more by listening. Okay, so let's go. As we walk into the forest, we just started our walk, I'm noticing a lot of acorns from all these red oaks on the ground. So you need to be very careful about walking on red oak acorns, or any acorns, because it's like walking on marbles, and you can take that from someone that knows. You can really injure yourself. Now, something else that I found here walking along are some hickory nuts. So that tells me one of two things: that There's hickory trees around here, or a squirrel or bird or some animal carried the hickory nut here. I don't think I have to look very far to find hickory trees, although they're not, large ones are not jumping out at me right now, so I'm going to keep my eyes peeled for them. But this is definitely a hickory nut, and I believe it's a pig nut hickory. We have hickory trees around here. We also have shagbark hickory, which the bark is, it looks very shaggy. I hope we find some, and I can show you the difference between a regular hickory tree and a shagbark hickory tree. We actually had two of those side by side at the Prouty estate on a previous your backyard, but you can see here, this is a pig nut hickory, and I'm peeling off the four, well, I've got three of the sides off. There's four of the sides that are off, and that's the nut. And that's hickory. I was actually given some hickory tea that someone at the COA made for me, that brewed up hickory tea out of the bark of shagbark hickory. And I have to say, it was pretty good. Okay, let's go. As I walk through here, and I'm seeing a lot of red oak, I'm noticing also a lot of smaller white oaks. And here's a white oak right here. And we had pointed this out before, I think at Bumblebee Park, that the white oak, you'll notice the leaf on the white oak tends to be rounded. That's a characteristic of that species of tree. The red oak, on the other hand, this was on the ground, you'll notice that the leaf on that is pointed. Okay, so that's a difference when there's leaves that are out. Now, differentiating between the two species in wintertime when there aren't any leaves out is a little trickier. You have to look at things such as the bark. But right now we have the leaves out, so we're going to take advantage of that. And white oak, red oak, white oak, red oak. Okay. Okay, we're starting to gain a little bit of elevation, and actually we're definitely going up. I notice all around, I start seeing a lot of boulders that are being placed, and I have to remind you all of the Pleistocene glacier that receded from here about 13,000 years ago. And when it receded, it certainly dropped a lot of its load that it was carrying with it in terms of sand and rocks and boulders and things like that. And we see that dotted on the landscape here. Am I breathing heavy at my age? I can't believe this, but anyway, I am. Now, something else I want to point out here that I'm starting to see. There's a lot of fairly good-sized white pines around here. So that makes for kind of an attractive forest, an oak, white pine. I saw some lower hemlocks, which is nice, and just all these different shades of green. And green's my favorite color, so I'm just struck by all the different shades of green. So let's continue up. Well, we started at an elevation of about 280 feet where I parked the car. The height of land here is going to be on the order of 350 feet. So we will make that height of land fairly quickly. A few features I'd like to point out here are these beautiful old stone walls. We have to remember how this land was used over the years, that while we're in a beautiful forest, many of these trees are 50, 60, 70 years old, not much more than that. Certainly this white pine is older than that, and we can tell that by the diameter, the girth of the base of that tree. But you can also see where this tree is oriented to the wall, that this served as kind of a sentry to the wall. So these stone walls were used to demarc land so the area could be used for agriculture or other purposes. Now, walking up here, I noticed with these different pine trees, I found a few types of pine cones. So this is the pine cone from the white pine tree. And another big hint for the white pine tree, other than the fact I've got about 120-foot white pine next to me, there's also a lot of white pine needles here. And these too can be very slippery to walk on, so you need to be cautious of that. But then I also found what I believe is a red pine cone. Now, I saw several red pine trees coming up here. I believe they're red pine. And these are somewhat unique, not unique to Littleton, but they're not all that common around here. And these mix into the forest really nicely. They make for a nice look in the forest. And just catching out of my eye over here, here's a fairly large one, large red pine over there. And while it may look a little sickly in the lower branches, when you get up, when you start going to the top, that tree looks pretty healthy, and there's a lot of cones on it. There's a lot of cones on it, and that's probably that's certainly the better part of a 100-year-old tree, that red pine there. And this white pine, I have to believe, is about 120 years old, but we wouldn't know unless we counted the rings. Okay, that would be the most definitive. But to count the rings, you'd have to cut the tree down, which is not a good thing in all cases, but there are techniques using what's called dendrochronology. When trees need to be dated, or when one wants to date a tree, they take a small instrument and they bore into the tree, and they take a core sample out of the tree. They then extract that core, and from that core sample, you've done minimal damage to the tree. It heals quickly from that, and you can count the rings in that little core sample. And that's using a technique called dendrochronology to do that. So you don't have to cut a tree down to get a good read on how old it is. Okay, let's continue on. Well, we just ventured upon a pretty nice example, pretty nice specimen of a gray birch. It's, what's that, about 2 feet? Better part of 2 feet wide. So it's got some good age on it. I always get a little confused telling the difference between gray birch and black birch. So the leaves do provide some diagnostic value. Something to point out about the birch trees, although all trees have these, are these lenticels. And those are the horizontal, what appears to be breaking of the bark. But actually these lenticels provide a very important function of allowing the tree to exchange oxygen and gases with the environment. So when you see trees with lenticels and cracks in them, it does not necessarily mean the tree is in bad shape. In fact, it may mean just the opposite, that it's in very good shape. I do notice on this side of the tree, there's a lot of moss, and it seems to go up, well, I'm looking at least 20 feet up. It seems to go up, and I don't see that much moss on this side of the tree. Now, if I could get a little bit oriented here. So here's the sun. We're just about at high noon, a little bit beyond high noon. So that would say high noon, sun, right? This side would be north. North facing, a little more moss. South facing, not as much moss. So this side of the tree presumably would be drier. I think that's probably marginally true because there's certainly a lot of cover in the woods here with leaves and everything. However, in the winter, when the leaves fall, a lot more sun would tend to come through and hit the south side of the tree. Okay. Okay, we've pretty much reached the height of land now, and as we walk along, I'm paralleling a stone wall here. And it's a stone wall built out of a lot of granitic rocks, some gneiss, GNEISS, and some quartzite. And we have to keep in mind, as we walk through this area, the cultural significance of this area. This is Neshoba, and this was the land that Sarah Doublet lived in. And this was a part of the village of the praying Indians. And this area has a very significant part of Littleton culture and the culture of Native American Indians. So we need to keep that in mind. Now, looking around here, I'm a little bit distracted. I see what looks like a large pitch pine. And this has me wondering if what I called out as a pitch pine a while back, what I called out as a red pine a while back is not a pitch pine, but this looks like a pitch pine. And you don't see many of these in Littleton. Large scales. The bark is large, platy scales. I'm not going to peel it off. That wouldn't do the tree any good, but it's a very attractive tree. And I look beyond, I see a lot of glacial erratics laid out there, some throughout the forest. Looks very, very, very nice. Lots of shades of green. Love the shades of green. Okay. Well, the trail turns a little bit to the left, and we're on quite a large bedrock outcrop. And this reminds me that at some point when we're walking, we really should be looking down, because it would be very easy to get enamored with the beauty of what we see and then take about a 4-foot drop here. So at some point when you take a step, make sure you look down. So here we go over this bedrock. Okay. A lot of low bush blueberry around here. There's no berries left on things. I'm sure the birds and other animals, maybe even a bear, they love blueberry, has eaten them. But there's a lot of low bush blueberry that's out here. Okay. Beautiful trail paralleling this wall. Okay, we've come to the crossroads, or at least a crossroad. This is a shortcut to the AT&T path, which is an area that we looked at that we walked through on Sarah Doublet Part 1. But we're going to take a left down here, and I believe this is going to take us to a little surprise. So let's go this way. Well, we're still on the Ed Bell Trail, at least for another 15 or 20 feet. And what we've noticed here is there's a lot of hard-working squirrels among us. There are acorns that are dropping left and right. One almost hit mark, just missed. But you really need to be aware of that. But this is an absolutely beautiful day. We just ran into some people, had a delightful talk. We're coming to a crossroads here where the trail markers go from, the trail blazes go from blue to red. We have a few questions of where we're going, but we have plenty of time, so we're going to venture down this way. Well, we've just encountered some other people. It's no surprise that we're going to run into a lot of people on a beautiful piece of land on a beautiful day. And these two people, the gentleman said that he had encountered about 2 months ago what appeared to him to be a wild pig on the Ed Bell Trail, small. He didn't note whether it had tusks or not. There were none that he could see. But his description and demeanor sounded pretty good. So keep your eyes out for a wild pig. I know I will. Okay, we've encountered a tree. Now this has been gnawing at me since we started out, where we encountered what I said and I thought was a large gray birch. But then I started thinking and doing a little reading, and guilt started to build, and I'm wondering, was that really a black birch? And I'm beginning to think it may be a black birch, but I'm not going to take that to the bank. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to say that in identifying the various species, some are very easy to identify and some are very, very difficult to identify, both in terms of the flora, the fauna, birds, and all sorts of animals. So what's making me think now that this is black birch are some leaves that when I matched up, this seems more closely aligned to what a black birch is. So nothing's cast in stone. Well, you remember up above I mentioned that there was a little bit of a surprise we were going to have. Well, here we are at the surprise. We're at one location of a vernal pool, which is a body of water that comes and goes. And this year being as dry as it is, the water has certainly gone. But this is clearly an area that's a little muddy, or appears muddy, and it's soft underfoot. And I think what you would find in the springtime, that this would be water. It would be a place for perhaps frogs to breed. I'm sure the birds would love this area. And this is called a vernal pool, so it's very firm. Let's see, I'm not even going to try to use that word. Let's just call it a vernal pool, and the water is not here year round. And I see here this large piece of moss, beautiful green, soft as could be. I can really feel it's soft underfoot. But I wouldn't expect to find any water this time of year. Here's a nice spider's nest. I'm always struck by how intricate these spider nests are. I don't see any spider, but I do see the little things caught in it, so he'll be having dinner. Actually, if I go back here a little bit further, it is a little damper here. Another nice spider's nest here. So if we were to come here in April, May, we would see some water here, and we would probably see a little more activity and wildlife. We're a little past noon. I'm a little disappointed that I'm not seeing or hearing any birds now, but that's not so uncommon this time of the day. I hope that I can continue to work on the videographer to perhaps get up earlier so we can get out when the birds may be out. But we'll continue to press on and see what we see. Well, I just noticed on the trail some small American beech trees, and the characteristic of the beech tree is sort of twofold. One fold is the bark is very smooth. It's very smooth in nature. And unfortunately, something we see in birch trees, they're targets of people that, young lovers or people that just want to put their mark in. But here we have an American beech tree that's in absolutely beautiful shape. And this is probably a 2-foot girth on it. It's a beautiful, beautiful tree. And something to point out that I mentioned on the birch trees that are very noticeable are the lenticels. But we see here on the American beech tree, it too has lenticels. They're just not as striking as on the birch trees. But again, this aids the tree in the exchange of gases with the environment. You can see them all here. This is a beautiful tree. Wow. So we've gone from oak, red oak, smaller white oak, pitch pine, black birch / gray birch, which I'm hedging on one way or the other. Now we're in a lowland, a lower area here where the vernal pools are, and we're seeing beech in a lower area. Here's some smaller beech. Now I'm walking over here, and this is almost like a little dry creek bed that's coming out from the vernal pool, probably heading towards Neshoba Pond, actually. And I'm now seeing some hemlock, and here's an example of one of the hemlock trees here, and I love hemlock. The very wispy nature of the tree. They make a great area for deer to kind of yard underneath because the branches tend to be up. So deer can come here in the winter, hunker down, get some protection from the outside, and still have plenty of room because the branches don't go to the ground. Here's another one of these black birches here. And it does look like this dry creek bed heads out towards Neshoba Pond. So this is a delightful area. I'm hearing blue jays. Now I'm starting to hear a lot of blue jays calling, and I just heard in the background a catbird. What I'm really surprised is that I haven't heard the cry of any red-tailed hawks or other raptors, because this is right around now, third week of September, we're talking peak raptor migration. And I'm surprised that I haven't heard any, but my ears are open, as are my eyes. So let's continue on. Okay, well, up in this white pine, Mark just noticed this large, it looks like a nest up there. And what I've learned, and this is somewhat anecdotal information, but what I have learned are, my hunch would be that that is a squirrel's nest, that squirrels will tend to nest, build their nests closer to the trunks of trees, whereas a bird's nest, okay, would probably be out on the branches a bit, okay? And one of the reasons it would be out on the branches a bit in the case of a bird is a little more protection, okay? So my hunch is that's a squirrel's nest, and whoever is living there has a pretty nice perch because they're overlooking some beautiful land. And that happens to be in their backyard. Well, we've just come out onto the AT&T right away, and that meant we just came off the Tataguine Loop. Now, I'm sure I didn't do that name any justice, but you'll see that on the map. But one thing I wanted to point out here, there's some very large boulders here. Undoubtedly glacial erratics, but what I wanted to point out here on this rock is take a look at the folding along this boulder here. That's undoubtedly a sign of high compressional forces that metamorphosed this rock. That when this rock was in a more viscous state, not quite fluid, but a little more viscous, it was subjected to compressional forces that caused that to occur. One other thing that I wanted to mention while I'm down here resting, and I can get a couple more minutes, is I think we ran into an American chestnut tree. We found a tree, there were several leaves on the ground, we picked one up, and if you recall, up at Oak Hill, we found some American chestnut trees up there, and we also did a show on the American chestnut tree. And one of the distinctive features of the chestnut tree leaf is it has this look like ocean waves. And ever since I heard that from Jim Cool, that was on our first show, that's a way that's going to stick with me for my life, to remember what an American chestnut tree leaf looks like. So I think there's some American chestnut here. And it looked fairly healthy. It will succumb to the blight eventually, but this was about a 35-foot tree. And I think there's some in the Sarah Doublet forest. Okay. Well, we're finishing up our trip into the Sarah Doublet forest via the Ed Bell Trail. We've been here for a few hours, probably 2.5 hours, and it's been a delightful day. We've seen a lot of interesting things, from rocks to trees to vernal pools that had no water because we don't have a lot of water now. We took some time to search for Sarah Doublet's cave, and we have not been able to find that, so that will give us a reason to come back and check things out. But I'd like to encourage you to come into the Sarah Doublet forest, whether you come in through the Knapp Jenkins Trail, which was shown in our first show, or the Ed Bell Trail, which is featured in this show. It's an absolutely gem in Littleton's conservation trail system. It's just a delightful place to spend an afternoon, and I really encourage you to come in. I hope you've enjoyed this show. We've certainly enjoyed filming it and bringing it to you. We'll see you next time.